we saw the final Karine Jean-Pierre press conference, and now we're hearing that she wanted to be all about her, how many press conferences she gave, how many questions I think she answered, or I don't know how many days and things like that. And I talked about her personal sacrifices and talked about Biden, but would not let John Kirby come in and actually provide some news, which is, I think, important at the end of your administration. The fact that this Israel-Hamas deal, we'll see if it's able to actually come together. It's always, it sounds great, and it looked like it was something to celebrate, but it's never done until it's done. And this one has multi-parts to it. So even the first part is not done until it's done. But she didn't want Kirby coming in to even speak about that. So he had to make the rounds basically on all of the networks and get out. And of course, he's been very clear that the Trump negotiating team, President Trump, the incoming team, was there and also a part of these negotiations because they have to actually implement it. This is going to be implemented by the president and the State Department and the people who are in the top negotiators. Remember, President Trump has put in place a special envoy and team just for these issues out in the Middle East and to end this conflict. They, of course, need to be a part of it because every one of these is fraught with issues, never perfect, and also not done until it's actually done. And so you've even got issues coming up today we'll talk about as well about, will we even get to part one of this three-part deal that has been laid out before us? And I want to go to Will Haynes because, Will, the issue it was that even though Biden had his time last night to speak to the American people, it was not really even about Biden. It was about her. That was bizarre. It was about a press secretary and not wanting to even talk about one of the bigger co-accomplishments, however you want to brand it, but you'd have to say that the Trump team was also part of it. So she didn't want to do that much, and so she just said people can go on some phone call later and get info.
It was very bizarre that typically, I'll give her this, typically the final press briefing is kind of a chummy situation with the reporters that you've spent years with and thanking them. Not typically do you have a very large news item that the people want to hear from the White House about, even if they're only the White House for a few more days. And instead of having the normal people that would be there for that press briefing, people from the State Department, people like John Kirby, who is the spokesman for the National Security Council, she didn't have any of them. And we're going to talk to Rick Grinnell about this in the next segment, but it was such a selfish press conference to say, even though there's something huge the American people need to know about, I'm not going to do my job on the last day. I'm just going to make this about me.
Usually there's not something really big to talk about. So a lot of times this wouldn't even be covered so heavily outside of kind of the Washington media world of, everybody, back and forth and just kind of saying goodbye. But there is something major to talk about where two teams on opposite sides of the political spectrum were able to get to a negotiated deal and assist that between Hamas and Israel. They've been clear that both the Biden negotiators and the Trump negotiators played a key role in that. And of course, the Trump team has to implement this deal, which is, until it starts even being implemented, Rick, as always, right, it could crumble at any moment. But she didn't even want to talk about that, which could have been a way to kind of go out on a success from these press conferences. Instead, it was about her. And she wouldn't even let John Kirby come speak.
Yeah, look, I think there's real big trouble within the Biden administration. They don't like each other. She undercut the State Department spokesman. She acted like she didn't even know who it was. And then she said he speaks for himself. When he was speaking at the State Department podium, he complimented the Trump administration. She's barring Kirby from coming in. She thinks that she's successful in kind of creating enemies from within her team. But I can tell you that her reputation has taken a big hit. People will remember this later. And she's proven to be a disastrous spokesperson for a disastrous administration. But let me just say one other thing, Jordan. You and I have talked about this in the past. The Trump team, we handed the Biden team peace around the world. Yeah. We literally handed them peace. They created multiple wars, one in the Middle East, one in Europe. They're escalating. They're not even getting better. We're now going multiple years and it's getting worse on both accounts. I get angry that we have to dig them out of this hole because there are no good options left. And so when we come up with a measure like a peace deal, that clearly Donald Trump is the reason for this peace deal, it is not a perfect deal, but it's because we have hostages that have been held for more than a year of escalating war. We are in a terrible situation because of the Biden team. We're in a hole. And so I get angry that there's critiquing of our ideas when the Biden team has put us into this hole. There are no good options left because of them.
Yeah, that they put everybody in a very tough spot who's coming in. And this fact that they didn't even want to acknowledge that this will have to be implemented, that this, again, imperfect deal that we hope, again, leads to more families, some families being reunited, some families even, getting the closure. We don't know how many people are actually alive, how many people with these names that in the first release, we represent a couple of them that were on that list, and there's no indication whether they're going to be returned bodies or they're going to be returned alive. And will we even get to that first stage of this deal? So I wanted to talk to you about that too. The idea here that, it right now, as it stands, yes, the Biden team is still in office, and of course that's true until Monday when President Trump takes the oath and his team enters. But I think what people are really seeing is when you've got these complications around the world, the Trump team wasn't just transitioning. They were having to start negotiating well before President Trump takes the oath on Monday and making decisions about these deals that are never going to be perfect, certainly when you didn't have any control of how you got to this point.
Yeah, and let's remember, we never would have been in a war in Europe, in a war in the Middle East if Donald Trump had been president these last 4 years. That's just a fact. We delivered peace. We were having deals between the Arabs and the Israelis that were peace deals. Joe Biden delivered us war, and so now we're trying to dig out from that. But let me give it a little bit of context over the last year. The Israelis have had to ignore the Biden administration and make some very tough decisions. They've been able to successfully take out the leadership of Hamas and really degrade this terrorist organization. The Iranians are back on their heels. This may be the time to take a vulnerable deal, to step out and be vulnerable, is my point. Time will tell. History will show if it's the right thing. This deal is not perfect. But the reality is we have not been put into a perfect position because of Joe Biden, and the choices are stark. And so I think the Israelis are recognizing they've been successful against Hamas. Maybe now is the time to create a measure where you take a risk and you reach out for peace.